First, let's wet the sky area. We don't want to put too much water down. So sometimes you'll get a slightly raspy sound because you've run out of water. And that's good because we don't want a puddle. We just want the paper dampish. Then we want to get some crimson, some red, and let's check. Yeah, that's not too bad. But more. Okay. It's fairly watery. And you don't want it to spread too much. But because the paper is not super wet, you have to work fairly quickly. And I think here we can do lots of water and make that quite soft, like that. And then maybe quite a bit of water there and soft. That's good. It was drying out too much. Okay, so now maybe I want to make it a little bit redder, just a little, maybe here. That's too red. Add some water, water it down a bit, and do it again. And here too. Like that. That will do. Now to make the purple mix, so a bit of blue, a little bit of red. That's a nice purple mix. But maybe a little bit thicker because I think it's going to spread too quickly. Okay, putting my brush on the rag gets rid of the excess water on the brush. Okay, I'm not sure about this. It looks maybe like a little bit too wet. We'll have to wait. Now I'm going to sweep across, but not the whole way. So I'm not going to go all the way along here. And I'm going to do here. And it's gone a bit dry here, which can be a nice effect. Now this has exploded, so it might be okay, but it might not be. We'll see. Okay, and then a little bit more red here, and then on this side just a little bit. Here we go. One there, and then maybe this going across a little bit like that. Looks a bit watery. And then finally, let's do this again. It spread a bit more than I wanted it to. I want to do a line down here. And then just one more here. Okay, and then I think that's it. I might just get some tissue and get like a corner like that and just go across. So it's too dry now, sadly, but sometimes if you're quick you can do a little bit of correction. That's a bit rougher than what I wanted, and this bit here exploded out far more than I wanted, but it's good enough. So let's leave that to dry. Now let's paint the mountains in the distance. So this is going to be mostly blue, a cool colour which will give a feeling of distance, but maybe pure blue wouldn't be too great, so I'm going to add a little red because it will look a little bit more natural. And this is going to be quite a watery mix. Let's check it out. First of all, yeah, that's dry. It's very important this is dried. And here we go. So it's best to make your mountains as simple as possible, especially if they're in the background. So you can see what I've done here, just down, up a little, down, and then slightly up. And you want to make them irregular. So I think that's irregular enough. They're roughly the same height. This goes up a little bit higher, and you want something like that. You don't want it to look too similar, too symmetrical. You certainly don't want it to look like the letter M. Okay, so the bottom of it we want to be soft and white. So what we do is we wash out the brush, dry it on the rag a little, and then we're going to go up below the line. Now you have to do this fairly quickly, because if the paint above dries, then that's it, you've had it. So don't leave it too long, and have to be careful that your brush is not too wet, because if this is wet and it's wetter than this paint, then you're going to get an ugly mark. So when you dab it on the cloth, you don't want it to be totally dry, but it needs to be maybe 90%. There, and you can see I got a slight line there because it was too wet. My brush was too wet, so I've just dried it and I can erase that, but ideally you don't want to have to do little corrective techniques like that. But it's all a learning experience. Okay, there we go. Now let's leave that to dry. Now let's paint the foreground. So I'm going to begin with a fir tree here. So the top of the fir tree I want to be light because the sun's hitting it. So I'm going to make it redder, although I will add a little bit of blue to it. That's too much. Okay, there we go. Maybe a bit too much still. Maybe the first time I was right. And this needs to be quite dry. And as you can see, whoops, I'm splaying the hairs on my brush like this, so that they're all separated. That will give a nice look. Now my tree will begin about here and it's going to stop about here. It's really important to have a good idea of the height of your tree. And it's going to have 3 parts. Keep it simple. 1 here, 1 here, 1 here. And remember, it all needs to be irregular. Irregular in sizes and irregular in distance between each part. So here we go. the top part here. So although I splayed these hairs, didn't work that well. Soon all the hairs come back together again, and you really want to separate them. But one thing that's good about this mix is it's not too dry. If it's too dry, then it will dry out super quickly, and that's quite stressful. We could spray it, so that's a good idea. And then with this last one, as I said, don't make it equal distance, so let's make it maybe a little bit longer and smaller, something like that. Okay, so I think that's it. Now quickly we want to pick up our liner brush, and now we're going for the underside of the tree, and this is going to be dark and cool, so we want a lot of blue in this. There we go. And we want it hopefully to be a bit thicker. So we don't want too much shadow, but it will come up a little bit like that. And then here too. And this is drying out very quickly. So I should get the spray bottle and just spray above. And that just gives me a bit more time to work on this tree. And maybe a little dark bit there. I hope you can see this. It does look a little bit shiny, which is annoying. Okay, and now we're going to have the main trunk coming down. Now you can have this trunk curving. I'll have it a little bit irregular, but I won't make it curve because I want to just keep it simple. And remember, it is going to get thicker, so it's kind of tricky to make it get a little bit thicker. You have to be careful. Going to have a few branches here, and maybe this needs to be a tiny bit thicker. That's more than I wanted, and I now have to make this thicker, but there you go. And there we go. Doesn't have to be perfect, just has to look kind of tree-ish. Okay, that is too much. I'm going to do a bit of correction now. I'm going to get my red and I'm going to just raise that up a bit and hide some of these branches because that was too much. There we go. That's pretty nice actually. Quite happy with that. You can see that it's all a bit irregular. Now we're going to do the grass at the bottom, so have to make a nice mix. In the distance I'm going to have it slightly reddish because although it's warm and normally warm colours are in the foreground, I want it to look faint, and red will be fainter looking than blue, I think. But we will add a bit of, it'll actually be a bit purple. So this mix is tricky to make because we don't want it too thick and we don't want it too watery, and the reason is we want to create this rough effect like this. Now if the mix is too watery, you're just not going to get that effect. And as you can see, it really looks good. So the mix has to have a little bit of thickness to it. There we go. I like that. So what I'm doing is I'm pressing the brush down and then pushing up pressing down and pushing up. Now you can practice this on scrap paper, and I recommend you do that so that you get familiar with the technique. So it's pressing down and then pushing up. It's not how you normally paint. And then I'm going to spray it because it's drying out super quickly. And you want to spray not directly at the paper but above, so the water droplets fall down onto the paper. Then I'm going to make a slightly thicker mix, more blue, a little bit of red, and I'm just going to quickly fill in this bit here. And it doesn't matter if it's a bit irregular and rough. In fact, I want that. And I like that. So that's a darker mix with more blue in it in the foreground, and it gives us a feeling of perspective, as you can see. And now I want to do a few fir trees in the distance, just little ones. So this is fairly watery mix, and I'm going to do a tree here, and then there we go, like that, and then like that. Now that doesn't look so good, but the more of them that we do, the better. The more it starts to look good. So that's one, that's two. Okay, and let's do maybe one more over here. So here we go. One more over here. There we go. I want to work on this still, and it's drying out super quickly. So this spray bottle is going to save us because we can re-wet it. It'll even add some texture if we're lucky. Now I want a super thick mix. Here we go with this super thick mix. The spray bottle has given me some more time, and we're going to do the rocks now. So I've done this quite a few times, so I think I've got a feel for it now, but at first it really might not work well for you. So stick with it, persevere, and I'll just spray that a bit more. Oh, and we're getting a bit of texture. Now you want some rocks, but you don't want too many, and getting that balance is where the art comes in. Learning how to add enough but not too many and not too little, and it can be difficult. Now I'm going to scrape out the tops of the rocks. Now this timing is super important, and I think it's still a bit too wet. So while I'm waiting, I'm going to try and add a little bit of texture. Well, that's too watery, bit thicker. I'm going to try and add like some not texture really, but some shadows in the grass, which is going to make it look a bit more interesting. Wow, it's really dried down here, so I need to wet down at the bottom here. It's so essential to have a spray bottle. So as you can see, I'm doing these little marks suggesting shadows, and the important point about this to remember is the further away these shadows are, the more they're going to be just like a thin line like that, and the closer they are, the deeper they're going to be, the more they're going to come down like this. That's probably too much, to be honest, and that will do. And some of these have got a bit mixed up with the rocks, but I think we can get away with it. Okay, let's see if we can scrape out. I think here we can. Now, as you can see, I'm really pressing down here, and that's worked out wonderful. It maybe is a bit too regular, so make it a little bit more irregular, and then it also becomes more interesting. And then here too. And you want this variety of thick and thin. So sometimes I'm using the front of my nail for these big fat marks, and then sometimes I'm using the side of my nail for these thinner marks, like that one. And that variety is absolutely essential. And one thing you'll find, as you get good at this, you'll just go crazy and do too much. And I've actually probably done too much here, to be honest. But still, it happens, and I'm quite happy with it. It looks quite good. It might be a good idea. You've got to remember, these are rocks in the grass, so you want an uneven bottom to them. It needs to be uneven. Right, that's actually grass there, doesn't matter. And I think we're getting very close to the end of this picture. Yeah, there we go. Oh, it's turned out much better than I thought it would. I'm a little disappointed with the sky, to be honest, with these rough edges. You do get them, but I wanted something a bit more nicer looking than that, but it still works. A final thing we could do is some birds. So get the liner brush, and then maybe over here, one, and that's not perfect, but you can leave it like that because it works. Two, and then one more. Three. Didn't quite work out there, so what I do is I just do that. Well, people probably won't notice. It's a bit thicker than I wanted, but there we go, good enough. And there we go, a nice countryside scene with a fir tree. Please have a go and have some fun. Happy painting.